Here we are, entering into the fourth session of our Big Question study. We have tackled, as the title suggests, some big questions thus far, showing how the Christian faith is both reasonable and supported by strong evidences. But what about other religions? Because of our day and time, we're not oblivious to the fact that the world is full of different religions and belief systems. We know that not everyone believes the same when it comes to fundamental religious questions. Things like, where do we come from? What is God like? What went wrong with humanity? Where does salvation come from? Not only that, but we often hear that most, if not all, of the world's religious beliefs are true and valid beliefs, just different ways of talking about the same thing. They compare it to a mountain that has many different pathways to the top, each religion representing a different pathway. Some pathways are more direct, whereas some loop around and take more of a scenic route. Nevertheless, all paths reach the top, which is what many in our culture would say about religion. The different religions may describe God or gods differently or have a different description of the afterlife, but in the end, all make it to God according to this pluralistic belief. Now, hopefully you can see why this topic is so important. Are all religious beliefs essentially the same? Are they all pretty much saying the same thing? And do they all, in the end, get us to the same place? To help us think through this topic, I spoke with Dr. Craig Hazen, professor of comparative religion and Christian apologetics at Biola University, and founder and director of their Christian apologetics program. So let's get right down to it. What distinguishes Christianity from other worldviews and religions?
What problem is being solved by the various religions? What's the problem being solved?
Okay.
Christianity definitely has a unique take on the problem being solved. The problem being solved is sin that separates human beings and God. That's the problem that's being solved. That's not the problem that's being solved in, say, Buddhism. In Buddhism, the problem is very different. It's about desire. It's about longing and desire that just doesn't give you much peace. And you got to find a way to extinguish that. In Christianity, the problem is very different. And in my view, that issue of sin that sits at the core and separates Christianity from all the other religions in terms of the problem that's being solved actually makes sense. I mean, you can't make sense of human history without understanding a concept of sin, a concept of the twisted nature of human beings that sits at our core. I mean, why do we fight? Why do we have so much trouble, holding hands, singing songs, and making the world a better place? Why can't we live up to those, idealistic notions, sung about by guys like John Lennon, We can't do it because there's something deeply embedded in us that's wrong, that's twisted. And I think that's what religions are really trying to address in various ways. But I think Christianity got it right.
One of the things that I have seen, just from my own study with world religions versus Christianity, is that there are certain points of departure. One of those being that it seems like all the other world religions are works-based versus Christianity being very much grace-based. Can you explain a little bit of that and what that means?
Yeah, I actually consider the idea that salvation in Christianity, being a free gift from God, is one of the unique features of Christianity. It really does set it apart in rather dramatic fashion from the other great world religious traditions, which really are human focused at the end of the day. What can you do to move closer to salvation in this particular religious system? What can you do to move closer to enlightenment? All of the burden ends up being put on the individual devotee or believer in that other world religion, whether it be Islam or Hinduism or Buddhism. It's remarkable how difficult a system like Buddhism is. when you really study it deeply and discover what the Four Noble Truths are and the Eightfold Path, to actually fulfill the Eightfold Path, you would have to be superhuman. You know, you'd have to be something other than human in order to be able to do that. And it's all about climbing this arduous ladder toward enlightenment, toward inner peace. But it's all on you. The idea in Christianity that it is some sort of free gift, just handed to you by some loving God, it doesn't make sense in most religions. And that's why it's a unique concept to Christianity. And it's I'm glad about that more than anything else, to think that it doesn't rest with me.
Some apologists would say that Christianity also, versus some of these other world religions, makes sense of the world around us better than the alternatives. Can you explain and kind of shed light on that notion?
Christianity isn't just a religion, you know, among all of the world religions. It's a unique view of the world. Before I was a Christian, I was very puzzled and trying to come up with my own view of the world. How do you make sense of all of this? It really was tremendously puzzling to me. But Christianity gave me a set of glasses that seemed to bring everything into focus. And so much so that, I mean, the excitement is palpable. That's why I think young Christians are so excited. Suddenly, the world has come into focus and they can make sense of it. It's like what C.S. Lewis said. It's not just that I can see the sun in the sky, but it's by it, the sun, that I see everything else. And I think that's the case with Christianity. It kind of opens your eyes to everything around you and puts it in proper perspective. One prime example of this would be something like the problem of evil, pain, and suffering. You know, how do Christians deal with evil, pain, and suffering, which is a common human experience? And how do, say, Eastern religious traditions like Hinduism or Buddhism deal with evil, pain, and suffering? Well, they deal with them in two very dramatically different ways. In Eastern religious traditions, the primary way of handling it is simply to call evil, pain, and suffering an illusion. Right? It's an illusion. It's something that if you spend enough time thinking about, and maybe through meditative practices and other spiritual disciplines, you can understand and assimilate deeply that that evil, pain, and suffering is actually illusory. And if you can do that in an Eastern religion, they may evaporate from your life. Is that the best way to approach that? You know,
Right.
Is evil, pain, and suffering really illusory? Well, I don't think so. No, Christianity approaches it from a very different standpoint. It's real. It's as real as can be, and it needs to be dealt with. Now, I, as an individual Christian or Christian thinker, I don't have the answer to every instance of individual suffering. You know, why does that child have leukemia? Right? Why has that person been in a terrible accident? You know, where was God? I don't understand, and I don't have an individual answer, but I do have an answer, I think, for the overall trajectory of the existence of pain, evil, and suffering. But in dealing with evil, pain, and suffering, Christianity goes about it this way. We don't deny its existence. We don't try to call it an illusion and brush it off the table. Rather, we are called to jump in, to help people who are in those conditions, because somebody's suffering worse than I am right now. And my great calling is to bear them up in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ as best I can, to alleviate the suffering with whatever I've got. I think the reason is because we worship a God. We worship a Savior who himself suffered dramatically so he can identify with us. And we also worship a God who has promised one day to wipe away every tear and to resolve every problem, every moment of evil, pain, and suffering that humans have experienced. That's a robust way to take on the problem of evil, pain, and suffering, recognizing it for what it is, not calling it an illusion, and then jumping in and doing our best to help.
So tell me, what else in your mind distinguishes Christianity from some of the other world religions?
Oh, I would be remiss not to mention my favorite topic that helps to separate Christianity from the pack of the great world religious traditions. This is the thing that most intrigued me about Christianity, because I think there's a standard idea among people, especially students who don't have much experience with the great world religious traditions, but know that they exist. They think, well, aren't they really all the same? Aren't they basically the same? And what they mean by that is, aren't they really all sort of resting on the idea that there's no knowledge to be had there? It's all about inner feeling. It's all about intuition. It's all about things you can't measure or know objectively outside of yourself. It's all about being things that happen inside of you. That's the assumption they're coming in with. That was the assumption that I had about all the world religions. It's like, great, you can sign up for one if you like. But understand, there's just no way to know. It's kind of a deep, abiding agnosticism that I think we find in North American culture for sure. But what I discovered to my great delight is Christianity does not fit that mold at all. Christianity is actually testable. It's testable. That's the word I like to use about it. I could use other philosophical words, I suppose, but I like this one because it sort of cuts across all levels of knowledge and discourse. Testable. What I mean by that is you can offer evidence for it. You can offer evidence against it, and the evidence actually means something. In other words, you can make decisions about whether to become a follower of Jesus Christ based on the evidence of the case. Now, this seems mind-boggling. Most people I present this general idea to think, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Religions don't have anything to do with that kind of objective testing that you're talking about. I go, that is not the case with most religions. You're exactly right. They do not involve testing on an objective level. They may have internal testing. Do I feel better about this? Do I sense that I'm moving closer to enlightenment? But they really don't have much going in terms of external testing. The kind of testing you would do if you're an archaeologist or a scientist or a crime scene investigator. What does the evidence have to say? Christianity actually rests on some evidential inquiry. Now, probably one of the most important examples of this comes from the New Testament, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. In verses 12 through 19, the Apostle Paul, who wrote this book, said some things that are actually startling if you have modern religious sensibilities. He said this. He said, if Jesus did not come back from the dead, Christianity's just not true. He said, if Jesus did not come back from the grave, your faith is worthless. Your faith is empty. He actually says this twice to make sure we get the point. If Jesus did not come back from the dead exactly as the New Testament says, Christianity is simply not true. Now you see how that's testable. That's something we can actually investigate. Was Jesus a real historical figure? Did he die at the hands of a Roman crucifixion team? Is there any good reason to believe that he came back from the grave on the third day, exactly as the New Testament says? The answer is yes. There's a tremendous amount of evidence. In fact, I would consider it to be one of the best attested facts of the ancient world, that Jesus was alive at point A, dead at point B, and alive again at point C. And this can be investigated. This can be studied, and you can make decisions based on the results of that investigation. Can you do that in Buddhism? Heavens, no. Can you do that in Hinduism? For goodness sakes, no. Can you do that in Mormonism? No. But in Christianity, it's wide open for investigation.
We have learned that there are lots of tests we can give to any religion that helps us to determine whether it is true or not. Now, these tests, if anything, show that despite what the pluralists would have us believe, not all religious beliefs are the same. In fact, it is an insult to the different religions themselves to say that all beliefs are the same when they are clearly not the same. It is absurd to think that the Christian claim Jesus is God and the Muslim claim that Jesus is merely a prophet are one and the same. Clearly, they are not. And it is because God has revealed himself in his word and in the person of his Son. We shouldn't be frightened or confused about the existence of other religions. Instead, our confidence in the truth of the Christian worldview should encourage and motivate us to be willing to lovingly speak that truth into the lives of those around us who believe differently than we do, not beating it over their heads or being argumentative, not merely trying to show that the Christian worldview is reasonable, whereas their own beliefs may be contradictory, but by being winsome, by having our words seasoned with grace and wisdom in hopes that they too might come to know the King that we serve, and that He alone possesses all the glory and power forevermore.